Annalyn here, and today I will be watching Disney's live-action The Jungle Book. So this will be easier than analyzing a cartoon, because the whole point of live-action is for the animals to look and act more realistic. But just because they look more realistic doesn't mean it's accurate. Live-action movies have the potential to trick people even more into believing the anthropomorphized version of wildlife. Disney's and Rudyard Kipling's goal for the story was not to educate. In fact, in Kipling's time, about the late 1800s, our understanding of wildlife and ecology was pretty poor. We did have the start of Darwinism and some genetics work, but those didn't cover animal behavior and species interaction. Humans are great endurance runners. We can run a lot longer than quadrupeds can because we can sweat and because we only have to lift 1 foot at a time while other animals have to lift 2 or maybe 3. The average human sprinting speed is about 20 miles per hour or 32 kilometers per hour, while animals like wolves and jaguars can average about 30 miles per hour or 50 kilometers per hour. Unfortunately, there's no chance for Mowgli to outrun the wolves. Bagheera is implying that if Mowgli can't learn to run like a wolf, another animal is going to hunt him down and eat him. But that doesn't happen to wolves. Carnivores don't really attack other carnivores. 1, because it's a lot harder work, and 2, because there's just not the same kind of nutrient value in carnivorous meat. Wolves who can't run slowly end up starving to death, and they become susceptible to disease, parasites, and attacks from invading wolves or invading predators, who will kill them for competition purposes. There are cases of cannibalism and desperate animals or sick animals eating carnivorous meat, but most of the time it'll be scavengers and omnivores that finish off a carcass.
It had a fig vine. Any tree girdled by a creeper is either dead or close.
So girdling is when the phloem of a tree is completely cut off. It's a specific way of killing a tree. The phloem is a thin layer of cells between the innermost bark and the outermost wood. It kind of works like blood veins in that it delivers nutrients up and down the trunk. If a bird or an insect burrows into the bark and cuts off the phloem in one spot, it's not a big deal because the cells around it can keep on working. However, if something comes along that cuts off the phloem all the way around a tree, there's no way for the tree to heal itself and it eventually dies. This can be done by fires, animals, and vines, the latter of which is most common in tropical regions with lots of plant diversity and lots of competition. There have been cases of children being rescued or raised by wild animals. The reason why this happens is not totally clear, but there are some common factors. The species involved already lived in a social group, and the people in these stories were about toddler age when they were adopted, which is a critical learning age because they are just starting to walk and talk. It's important to note that these cases did not play out like Disney movies. They are the result of kidnapping, abuse, neglect, and abandonment. When they are rescued, they have a difficult time readjusting into human society, and in some cases, they're never fully successful. So, Mowgli being raised by wolves is not so far-fetched. A leopard bringing him there is a little more questionable. Unlike lions that live in prides, leopards are very antisocial, especially males. If Bagheera was a female leopard who had just lost their kids, it would make more sense because there would still be a maternal instinct present. Even if that did happen, there would be no reason for the leopard to take the child to the wolves, because at that point the leopard had already established that this human child was theirs to take care of. More importantly, wolves and big cats are competitors, and they will fight each other, especially over a kill. There is no way a wolf pack would allow an adult leopard to roam their territory freely, especially so close to a den site when pups are present. So this is a really big wolf pack. I counted 13. which is over twice the size of most packs. There have been documented cases of packs over 20 or even 30 in Yellowstone, but they're not that common and they probably don't last long. So here we have an Indian crested porcupine that looks like he's trying to establish territory. They are mainly nocturnal, but in the winter, aka the dry season, they can be seen outside of their dens basking in the sunlight.
Hunting at the riverbank was now forbidden because, by law of the jungle, drinking comes before eating.
Nature does not stop. It doesn't call truces. Sometimes predators will actually use droughts and fires and floods and other things to their advantage. There are times where you will see a predator walking by prey animals without hunting, but that's not because they call their truce. It's because the predator just doesn't feel like hunting at the moment. Maybe they're not hungry, or they're too tired, or they're injured. Predators don't hunt 24/7, but their prey don't necessarily know this. If you were a gazelle and you see a lion walking by you, you don't know whether that lion is hunting or not. And if you make the wrong choice, if you decide not to run, you risk being killed. Situations like this will force different species together, but it doesn't mean that predation and competition is going to stop. Those things will carry on, and environmental stressors will amplify them. Thank you, Disney, for being accurate for once and having a porcupine puff up his quills and not shoot them. That is a myth. They cannot shoot their quills. It's basically the same thing as hair standing on end when an animal is threatened. Also, it looks like Mowgli barely touched the porcupine, but quills can become detached really easily, and all it takes is the slightest touch for them to be embedded. And that's the one thing that they don't show. Mowgli hops away as if he had just been pricked by a bunch of needles, but those quills would have been inserted into his skin, and he would have had to pull them out. Porcupine quills can cause deadly infections if they're not removed. In some cases, if the quills end up inside an animal's mouth, the quill can be forced up into the brain cavity and kill the animal that way.
In some packs, the runt gets eaten.
Wow, Aquila is brutal, especially since he's probably Gray's father. Wolves have a really high parental instinct when it comes to their pups, which extends to all members of the pack. Siblings will definitely fight each other and compete, but the parents will do whatever it takes to ensure that the majority of their pups will survive, be them runts or not. Circling vultures are commonly used as a sign of death, but there's no reason for them to circle a living animal. Some birds, like ravens, will follow animals to their kill to scavenge, but they don't tag along 24/7 for the aesthetic. I really hate the tendency to put predators against each other in these movies. Tigers aren't inherently evil and wolves aren't inherently good. Good and evil are make-believe concepts when it comes to nature. Animals are just going to do what they do. Everything has its place in an ecosystem, even if it seems like the only thing an animal does is kill other things. Aquila's threat is very true. Tigers are bigger than wolves, but I've watched a wolf pack gang up on a grizzly bear. Most of the time, they don't actually wind up fighting. What happens is the wolf pack surrounds the animal and will basically pester it until it gives up and goes away. Shere Khan would know better than to mess with a wolf pack of this size. Crocodiles attack hundreds of people per year? I don't know what this boy is thinking.
Bow your head. Show them respect.
Bowing before an elephant is less a sign of respect and more like, I'm going to make myself smaller and less of a threat so you won't trample me. Note, I don't actually know how to react if you encounter a wild elephant, so don't use that advice. Standing on two legs is a threatening position. Animals usually only do it when they're trying to fight or trying to intimidate. Boldly walking around on two legs is really dangerous, especially around this herd of buffalo. If Mowgli didn't upset them, Bagheera would, being a known predator. Like I said before, prey don't always know when a predator is hunting or not, so they are going to be super defensive and probably end up driving the cat away. I do like this scene because it's a great, realistic example of a tiger using its camouflage to hunt. There is no way a wolf pack would let a tiger stroll so close to a den site when pups are present. They would have smelled them coming, and the whole pack would have jumped into action to provoke the tiger until he left. I love this scene because it's a beautiful example of using an animal's body language to convey emotion rather than just slandering on a human facial expression. Turning away from a potential threat and avoiding eye contact is a predator's way to avoid confrontation. You can see wolves do this when they're facing off prey, other wolves, or other predators. The point of this tactic is to catch the other off guard, to take a moment to rest, or to de-escalate a situation. In this specific instance, this would not happen, because the wolves are not going to let their guard down until the tiger is out of their territory. I was both shocked and proud of Disney for this scene. This is exactly the kind of brutality in nature. Not exactly a tiger yeeting a wolf off a cliff, but along those lines. PSA: don't try to ride wild animals. Kaa is an Indian rock python which grow to be about 20 feet or 6.4 meters, which is not as nearly as big as what's depicted in the movie. There was a snake that grew up to twice that size called Titanoboa, but they are an extinct species that lived in Colombia. Pythons rely on brute force and speed to take down prey, resulting in vicious battles until the animal suffocates. They wait until the animal has stopped moving to swallow it, since swallowing an animal that's still alive is potentially dangerous. Altruism is a behavior when one animal sacrifices its health for the benefit of another, but it's primarily within family groups. There's no reason a bear would fight a python, especially one that size, unless maybe it was desperate for food. Some situations look like altruism, for example, a hippo attacking an alligator that's drowning a gazelle, but odds are that's not true altruism, and there's another less obvious reason the animal is attacking. In this example, hippos are extremely territorial jerks that will attack anything that moves. Baloo is a sloth bear, which is confirmed in the movie and played off as kind of a joke, like, oh, you're a sloth bear, so you're lazy. What irks me is he is animated to look more like a brown bear. Sloth bears are one of the smallest subspecies of bear with a dark coat, so they look more like black bears. Disney did the work to change King Louie into Gigantopithecus, but paid no attention to Baloo's design. The only reason for this I can think of are sloth bears aren't as popular as brown bears, and they wanted him to be big so Mowgli could ride on his back and stuff. But either of those reasons are kind of weak. I think it could have worked perfectly if they did this accurately. Sloth bears are primarily insectivorous, but any bear will eat honey if given the opportunity.
Oh, those must have been females. Ah! They look like males from down here. Females do sting.
This is true, and really a jerk move on Baloo's part. The problem with Shere Khan taking over the pack by killing Akela is wolf packs are headed by a pair. Sometimes the female or male is more dominant, but if something happens to one, the other is going to keep on leading the pack. So Shere Khan killing Akela is kind of pointless because A, he's still not more powerful than an entire wolf pack, and B, Raksha would immediately take Akela's place. Either way, the pack would still have leaders.
The cuckoo bird is too clever to raise its young. Instead, it sneaks its eggs into the nests of simpler birds. So when they hatch, the mother bird is fooled. She feeds them, nurtures them. And do you know what happens to her own chicks? They starve and die from neglect.
The story about the cuckoo bird is true, except in some cases the young birds will eject the other eggs or hatchlings from the nest. They're called brooding parasites. This isn't a result of neglect on the parents' part. The birds are just doing what their instincts are telling them to do. They have a hungry chick in front of them, they're going to feed it. The cuckoo chick is simply able to outcompete the other chicks for food. Sloth bears and leopards are competitors, so just like wolves and leopards and tigers, they will fight each other if the opportunity arises. The animation and design of these elephants is weird. They have the size of an African elephant, but the head and ears of an Asian elephant. Also, all these adults have big tusks, but only some male Asian elephants have tusks, and the females don't have them at all, while both male and female African elephants always have tusks. Elephant herds have crazy parental instincts. They're mostly made of females, as the breeding age males set off on their own. You can see videos of an elephant calf in trouble, and the entire herd gathering around it to try and help. Gigantopithecus went extinct due to climate change at the end of the Pliocene. Whether or not it could survive in modern times depends on a lot of factors: food availability, competition, predators, new diseases and parasites. Yes, this was said in the 1800s, but in geological time that is very modern. It sounds like they're fighting a bunch of squeaky toys. Once again, fire is a symbolism of man's destructive nature and not part of the natural process of death and regeneration of forest stands. Luckily, this fire isn't so bad. The really bad fires of late in Australia and the western US are because those forests are drought-stressed, and we aren't doing enough controlled burns. Drought-stressed and dead trees are more ignitionable because they have low water in them. What the Jungle Book does right is making this fire a ground fire. These are small fires, not very hot, that only burn the dry dead stuff close to the ground. Because this part of the movie takes place in the wet season, the living trees are going to have high water content, and the fire isn't able to burn them and climb into the canopy, which would cause a way more severe fire. I found a video of tigers fighting sloth bears, and the fights are pretty close. In a lot of the videos, the bears scare off the tigers by standing on their hind legs, even though sloth bears are smaller. In this scenario, where Baloo is the size of a grizzly, my bets are on the bear. Male grizzlies can easily reach 600 pounds, while male Bengal tigers are stuck at around 400 to 500. The kill method of big cats is by biting the throat or neck. Both of them are really hard to do with a big brown bear, whose neck is underneath them. The back of the bear's neck is protected by thick skin, fat, muscle, and dense bone, so that's not an option either. Both tigers and bears attack by swiping, but Baloo is going to have more muscle with longer claws than Shere Khan. The battle might be close, but odds are against the tiger. This is a cool detail because it's pretty close to how wolves actually confront large animals. They surround it and systematically charge and flee until the wolves or the other animal gives up. But considering wolves have such a high stamina and there is multiple individuals in a pack, odds are the other animal gives up first. This tiger just tossed his own body weight in wolves off his back. Not to mention he just fought the pack, Baloo, and Bagheera. Animals can do some incredible things in the heat of the moment, but this is a stretch. A lot of fights you see end up being either short or super long with multiple breaks, because energy and stamina are really limited. A lot of us can take it for granted because we can just rest on the couch or grab something to eat from the fridge, but animals in the wild can't. Unless Shere Khan broke his neck in the fall, he probably survived. Living animals have a lot of water in them, so they don't just spontaneously ignite. With humans, the problem comes from wearing flammable clothing or makeup and hair products. If Shere Khan landed directly in the flames, he probably would have still gotten up and run away, and maybe later died of severe burns and infection. But considering this movie is setting itself up for a sequel, I bet he's probably alive. Forest animals aren't as scared as fire as a lot of these movies make you think, if they're in a habitat that burns regularly. During controlled burns, elk have been spotted coming directly behind the fire to take advantage of the exposed browse. Though of course there can be casualties, animals in fire-dependent forests know how to respond to fire, and in natural cases, this doesn't result in tremendous loss of life. Oh, now the elephants show up. They could have stepped on the tiger's neck at any moment, but no. Herbivores, like elephants, affect an environment's appearance depending on where they graze, how they graze, or where they don't go. It's not as direct as digging rivers, but they can affect soil erosion. When wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone, they actually changed the rivers because they made the elk herds move around a lot more and graze riverbanks less. More foliage around the rivers meant less erosion. So that was the live action The Jungle Book. I did enjoy it when I saw it in theaters. The CGI was cool, and I do like what they did to the plot and the characters. That was a little bit different than the original. It's clear that Disney picks and chooses their moments of realism as to capture the audience's attention. There's been a push to make more animal movies in CGI to make it look more realistic, but there's a big difference in looking realistic and actually representing reality. Stories like this, no matter how you tell them, what you do, are always going to be somewhat unrealistic, because the goal is not for education. The anthropomorphization in this movie isn't so much animals jumping up on their hind legs and singing and dancing, but it's projecting human ideas of law and order onto animals. Animals don't operate on a law of the jungle. They don't wage war against each other. There's no one animal that rules the entire forest. And if a child is raised by wild animals, their reality is far from a Disney movie.